Hello and welcome to today's 5 Minute Friday. I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Lorna Friedman. Lorna, you and I have very regular conversations about all that's going on in the world of HR, tech, healthcare, and so on and so forth. For those people who don't know you, you are a senior partner at Mercer, really focused around healthcare transformation.
Mhm.
And you actually have the accolade of being the Health Consultant of the Year according to Consultant magazine last month. And I think that the I know that you have always got lots of sort of interesting takes on what's happening in the market, and I know that you've recently been interviewing VCs and big business insurers on what they're thinking about and what they're doing at the moment. And so we'd love to kick off by getting your take on where we're currently at in the pandemic and what your sort of current view is.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's always really fun to talk with you, as you mentioned, and it's extraordinary, Chris. I was thinking and have used your phrase about boomerangs and frisbees when we talked last year at this time
Yeah,
about it's really a year ago in regards to the pandemic and just what an extraordinary 15 and 16 months. And you and I both sit, I'm in New York, right? You're in the UK. We both sit in geographies where we're seeing vaccination move forward, but it is very clear that, to many scientists and epidemiologists, that we are moving from a pandemic to an endemic, right? But many, many parts of the world are going back into lockdown. Clearly, we're seeing India, Malaysia, many other areas. And I think the most important, you know, thing for all of us to keep in mind is that none of us is safe until all of us are safe. And so what that really means is the fastest and widest path out of this pandemic is vaccines. And
yeah,
we have some extraordinary ones, and there's lots more. I mean, when you think about it, right, a year ago we were just talking. Now there's 15 approved, vaccines being utilized, something like 70 in other trials, another 70 in preclinical trials. So, Yahoo for science. But as for employers, for our, the folks who are listening here and who will hopefully hear from, the key issue I think for them and the key focus right now is that they really need to have a vaccine strategy as we move from this pandemic to endemic. So if I may, four things that I think employers
yeah,
can do. One is they can improve access. So when and by access, clearly in many parts of the world it's still government based. In some parts of the world, employers are able to either purchase or purchase in collectives, and we see them doing that, or purchasing through with insurers or with delivery systems. And in fact, when we do our surveys, probably a third, about 40% of US employers are looking to actively support vaccinations on site. And I give a little shout out to my friend, Dr. Steve Eiley, who's Chief Medical Officer up at Jaguar Land Rover, who put on LinkedIn, right, pictures of folks getting their jab there. So access is certainly, can you have it, but access is also, how do I make it easier to get the vaccine? How do I make it so that you don't have to stay in traffic, et cetera? How do I give technology so you can make appointments? So access, number one. Affordability, number two, right? Any way in which employers can help ease the cost of, and particularly the cost for individuals in certain areas for the vaccine. Probably the most important one is advocacy, super important. There's so much disinformation, and employers have done really well through this pandemic. 61% of employees trust their employers, and when they look to them for well-being, and that's from our surveys, our own Mercer surveys and our global talent trends. And really having reliable information, and that's a role employers can play. And again, when we look at our surveys, and we do COVID related surveys probably every month or every other month. They usually have thousands of participants, and they're in multiple countries. 75% of employers plan to encourage employees to get vaccinated.
which is
And
really strong.
it's super strong. And also, it just, the disinformation that goes around
Yeah,
is not irrelevant. There were studies actually both in the US and the UK when individuals looked at false information, and their confidence and their intent to be vaccinated dropped
yeah,
sometimes up to 10 to 12%. And in addition, we know it also contributes to the sorts of, you know, um, uh, bias and national, so anti-Asian activity that we've had and violence that we've had in the U.S. So disinformation is not innocent. It's and employers really have a role. And lastly, is accommodation. So I it's a big concern. And do you have time? Do you have can you go again? Can you go get the vaccine if it's not being delivered on site? And if you're a person who is, the vaccines do have some, all of them have some different challenges in regards to, some people just breeze through, some people, don't feel so well, and depending on what their job is and what they have to do. So really understanding, do they have sick leave? Do they have paid leave to be able to take the vaccination?
and so Laura, on what I'm hearing from that is, as we move from the pandemic to the endemic stage, is that that employers have got a really significant role to play in and can do so in different ways in actually supporting us to get out of this and to get back to life as normal, and that those companies, 75% of companies who say they are going to do something about it, and actively play a role, that is only a good thing in how they're going to be viewed by their employees and by
Absolutely.
society around them. So moving on to a bit of a different topic, what about the healthcare space? What are you seeing happening now around healthcare and how it's been impacted through the pandemic?
Well, so clearly, one of the big transitions here, and hopefully it continues to be sustained, because again, as the pandemic moves to the endemic, that means that certain areas will have lockdown, certain areas will hopefully not become overwhelmed, but you'll see the kind of intensity on the bricks and mortar system, and so more virtual care will be important, just as it was. But the explosion of it, undeniable, right? So the Journal of American Medicine said it's absurd. Actually, it was like 4,000% increase. And if you look at, if we look at investment, something you and I talk about a lot in regards to where that is. So Rock Health, which has been tracking, investment in digital therapeutics, and they have certain criteria, and digital health, the first quarter of March 2021, that investment was 6.7 billion. That's just the first quarter of the year.
Crazy.
And
Yeah,
they referenced that they've been doing this for 10 years. So 10 years ago, the annual was 1 billion. So the
yeah,
amount of investment in healthcare and the explosion of it is pretty amazing. Asia Pac, anticipation is to grow 25 billion US dollars in the next 5 years. And we saw employers, again, turn on a dime. We see carriers investing in it. We see, obviously the aggregation, in regards to, um, things like Grand Rounds making purchases, Cigna making purchases, Teladoc making purchases, and that aggregation. I mean, so yeah, it's
and
going to
what and what
continue to
and
be
what does
huge.
what does that mean for employers and employees in this sort of changing healthcare landscape?
Yeah. So first, a good call. So correlated with the current experience, I just want to reiterate, and we're doing this with lots of clients right now, is just making sure, and I work, as you know, with multinational clients, right?
Yeah,
So really understanding, as I would say, as a base, pandemic preparedness.
Lorna, I I um uh I feel we could talk for ages on this. There's so much happening. Thank you so much for sharing
Great.
today,
Oh,
and
my
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Good. All right. Take care. Have a great
Cheers.
weekend.